Okay, today's daf we're going to be learning is Rosh Hashanah daf Yud. Today's daf is sponsored by Heather Hadar Stone in honor of her daughter Hila Bat Hadar V'Yecheskel on her commission as a second lieutenant in the IDF Education Command. So proud of you and your accomplishments. Can't wait to see where you lead next. And by Jordana Hyman, to our amazing daughter, Priel Hyman Borowski, on her views today. We are bursting with pride and excitement as you begin your service. May Hashem protect you and bless you always with your fellow soldiers. With love, Mom and Dad. Big Army Day, Batzlacha to everybody. Okay, we are going to start our daf from the Braita that we ended with yesterday. Okay, we've been talking about Orla and Shemitah and Tosefet Shvi'it. If you remember, we have to add on extra days before the beginning of the Shemitah year. We're going to have a daf. I'm already going to tell you, you can see the Amud Aleph is very short, but that's often an indication that there's many different commentaries and a lot of different interpretations, and it's quite a daf that has caused a lot of different commentaries about what exactly is going on. So as usual, it's one of these dapim where I'll raise a few different opinions, and there are some issues with each one. As I always like to say, right, if things were simple, then there wouldn't be many different opinions. So just keep that in mind as we learn. So we had this Braita yesterday. Tanu Rabbanit. Echad hanoteah, echad hamavlich, echad hamarkiv. Right, someone who plants a tree, or someone who takes the idea of the markiv. The mavlich is to take a shoot from a vine and plant it in the ground next to the tree. Echad hamarkiv, which is grafting a tree. Erev shvi'it, shloshim yom lifnei Rosh Hashanah. Okay, the Braita is going to set up two tracks. One is you planted it 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, in which case, for the laws of Orla, al talo shana, this already is considered the first year. Okay, so let's just take the Hebrew years. Let's assume you planted in Tafshin Pei. You count, right, in 30 days before Rosh Hashanah on Aleph Elul. You already count Tafshin Pei as your first year, Tafshin Aleph, Pei Aleph is your second year, Tafshin Pei Bet is your third year. Okay, so when are you allowed to eat it? You would assume, okay, now this gets tricky, but you would assume you can eat it on Rosh Hashanah already. The fruits that grow in the year of Tafshin Pei Daled, you're allowed to eat. In a minute, we're going to see that's not exactly the case, but that's what it sounds like from here. And if you were to plant them 30 days before Shemitah year, you can leave them for the Shemitah year as well. You don't need to uproot them. But if it's within 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, Lo al talo shana v'asur l'kamam b'shvi'it, doesn't count as a year of Orla, and you can't keep them in the Shemitah year, meaning you basically overrode the laws of Shemitah because you didn't do, again, there's a bit of a different interpretation as to why. Is this a law of Tosefet? Right now it sounds like it's a law of Tosefet Shvi'it. That's what Rashi says, Mishum Tosefet Shvi'it, shemosifim michal kodesh. And you didn't do that added, right? You transgressed, so we're going to make you uproot it. You can't keep that tree from going. It's very confusing because later in the daf, we're going to understand this 30 days very differently, okay? So hold on, not very, but differently. So that's why it's going to be a little tricky because you're going to kind of understand things one way and then you're going to start thinking, wait, what's that 30 days for? Maybe it's for something else. So right now we assume it's because it's for Orla, it's not even considered a full year before. Likewise for Shvi'it, it's basically connected to that year, probably Midim Tosefet right now. That's what we're assuming. Now comes the tricky line. Uperot nitiyazo, and these fruits, okay, now which fruits we don't really know, it wasn't so clear. But Rashi and others are going to say what we're talking about is go back to the beginning of the Braita, to the first case, the 30 days. If you planted it 30 days before, then asurim ad tu b'shvat im orla ve'im lerevai revai. As I said a minute ago that I was going to change this, but we said, till now, you would think, I planted them on Aleph Elul. That gives me a month before Rosh Hashanah. That counts as a year. That's Tafshin Pei. Tafshin Pei Aleph is year number 2. Tafshin Pei Bet is year number 3. Tafshin Pei Daled comes in, I think I can eat the fruits. Comes the Braita and says, no. Since, and this is Rashi's interpretation, since you planted it only 30 days before, okay, there's a huge debate between Rashi and a bunch of commentaries and a bunch of commentaries on the other side. The Rambam, the Ravid, they're all with Rashi, and then the Ran and others are on the other side. Since you planted it only 30 days before, and that year, really, you're not supposed to eat fruits for 3 years. So that means that we need to extend that third year, okay? Which is really year number 4 already. Year number 4 comes in, comes the Braita and says, well, guess what? You can't eat fruits that didn't, now actually it's even trickier, that didn't bud until after Tu B'Shvat. You can only eat fruits that the tree budded after Tu B'Shvat. Okay, so even though you planted it on Aleph Elul and you had a whole month, which we say counts as a year, doesn't matter. You have to, not that it doesn't matter, it matters. So what does it mean though? That if you planted it those 30 days, even though you count it as a year, you don't have to wait till the next Rosh Hashanah, okay? But you do have to wait till the fruits bud on Tu B'Shvat. And only fruits that budded after Tu B'Shvat, and the tree that budded and fruits grew from there, only those are allowed to be eaten in the 4th year. Okay, so even though it's it's a very interesting halacha because it seemed very simple that we're going to go by Aleph B'Tishrei. Sounds like Aleph B'Tishrei comes in Tafshin Pei Daled, you should be allowed to eat it. But they say, no, that's not the case. Okay, you have till Tisha B'Av. So according to Rashi, this is only in a case, and then the question is, is it exactly on the dot 30 days, How far do we extend the 30 days? 30, 35, 40, 45, How far does it go? But it's basically only really instituted if you have very, very short year. Now, some say, well, maybe it should be all the way from Tu B'Shvat until there because you need 3 full years, So there's a debate about that. The other side of commentaries say, oh no, really what we're talking about here is anything that was planted before Rosh Hashanah, like around from Tu B'Shvat until Rosh Hashanah. And it's really including anything, We're going to push it off till Tu B'Shvat of the upcoming year. In which case, the biggest question on that commentary is, well then, and then the reason is actually, according to them, it's a different reason. It's because they believe that it's not because, okay, you didn't have enough of a year, so we're going to push off. It's that they believe that at least the way some people explain, anything that buds before Tu B'Shvat is really budding from the sap from last year's tree. In other words, it's the sap from last year that's giving it its energy to be able to bud. And therefore, it's all considered, until it's true that really this year it's permitted. However, anything that doesn't bud, let's say that buds until Tu B'Shvat is really from last year's tree. So because of that, it takes its energy from last year's tree, that's considered orla fruit. Okay, so then it's a different explanation, and it has to do more with the agriculture and how it works and how the tree grows. And therefore, if it was planted and it wasn't a full 3 years, so then it's going to be basically growing from anything. It's really it's not so much a matter of when you plant it, because it really has to do with when it's budding from. It's a combination. And then the question is, according to that, what's the significance of Aleph B'Tishrei then? The whole thing goes by Tu B'Shvat, then how does Aleph B'Tishrei make sense? And that's a big weakness with their approach. Some answers are given, but we'll leave it with that. So basically, it's not clear whether we mean Peirot. We have some case, whether it's a very broad case or whether it's a very narrow case, where sometimes we're going to say you actually can't eat the fruit starting from Rosh Chodesh, from Rosh Hashanah, 1st of Tishrei, but you actually have to wait till Tu B'Shvat. Now they say, and not only for Orla, but also the 4th year, which is Neta Revai. In other words, if we're going to push off the 3 years of Orla to middle of the 4th year, to Tu B'Shvat, we're also going to push off Nete Revai, which is the fruits that grow in the 4th year, which now we're going to say, again, whatever case this is, in this kind of case, then we're going to push it off. It's going to go from Tu B'Shvat to next Tu B'Shvat, and it's going to include any fruits that grew from a tree that budded between Tu B'Shvat and Tu B'Shvat is going to be the 4th year, is going to go into the 5th year also. Remember what happens in the 4th year? You have to bring the produce to Jerusalem and eat it in Jerusalem. It has sanctity. So now, Menahane Mile, where do we get this from? It doesn't seem, It seems very clear in the Torah. There's 3 years, there's 4 years, there's 5 years. Why all of a sudden are we pushing this off? Especially if we say Rosh Hashanah is Aleph B'Tishrei. It should be Aleph B'Tishrei. It shouldn't be Tu B'Shvat. So, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Umatu ba Mishmei Rabbi Yanai. Some people say, Rabbi Chia brought it in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Others brought it in the name of Rabbi Yanai. Amal Kha, the pasuk says, Uvashana Revi'it, Uvashana Chamishit. Okay, I'll read you the verse so that you understand. First, it starts talking. We're in Vayikra Yud Tet, Psukim Kaf Gimel to Kaf Hey. It says, when you get to the land and you plant any fruit trees, you do orla for 3 years. Okay, and Arelim Lo Yachel, you can't eat them. Uvashana Revi'it. Now, it should have said, Bashana Revi'it, in the 4th year. But it says, and in the 4th year. Yekol piryo kodesh elulim laHashem. All of its fruits will be sanctified to God. Uvashana chamishit. Again, it adds this and on the 5th year, rather than just saying on the 5th year. Tochlu et piryo. You should eat the fruits. Lo sif lachem tvuato ani Hashem Elokechem. Right? Okay, this is yours to eat. So comes the drasha and says, why all the vavs? It's to tell you, it's connecting between the 3rd year and the 4th year, and connecting between the 4th year and the 5th year. To tell you, פעמים שברביעית ועדיין אסורה, משום אורלה, ופעמים שבחמישית עדיין אסורה משום רבעי. That sometimes the 3rd and the 4th year overlap, that what's true for the 3rd year is going to be true for the 4th year. And right, that when we get into the 4th year, everything from the beginning of the year, in this kind of a case, again, whether it's exactly 30 days before that you planted it, or maybe even more. But the point is that sometimes they overlap, and the 4th year is actually going to be treated like the 3rd year. You can't eat the fruits. And the 5th year is going to be treated like the 4th year. You have to bring your fruits to Jerusalem. Okay, it's at least alluded to in the pasuk by that. Okay, next. Lema de lo ki Rabbi Meir. Okay, our whole day today is really dealing with this braita, which is, now we want to suggest that this Mishnah, again, we're going back to the 30 days. And as I told you, eventually we're going to change a little bit what the need for this 30 days is. Right now, we assume the 30 days is, in order for something to be considered a year, you need minimum 30 days. This is what we've seen before. We saw it with renting a house, right? That you don't rent a house for less than 30 days. So therefore, 30 days is a year. We saw with the kings that 1 day was enough to be considered a year. So sometimes it's 1 day, sometimes it's 30. So now we're going to say the fact that our Mishnah says 30 days seems to indicate that they hold, right? What I was kind of establishing is maybe it depends on the situation. But this is, the Gemara is going to assume, well, there must be a general rule. Okay, maybe there's an exception made for a rental of houses, as we said, because people don't rent houses for less than 30 days. But otherwise, we're going to go by a general rule. Either you consider 1 day or you consider 30. I'll give you an example. Waiting between milk and meat. Some people wait 5 hours because they say it's into the 6th hour. Some people wait 5 hours and 30 minutes because in order to be into the 6th hour, it has to be half an hour into it. So that's exactly the debate here. Is 1 day into the year or is 30 days? This is going to be our topic for the rest of today's daf. So why don't we suggest that it's not like Rabbi Meir, our Mishnah? Because Di'i Rabbi Meir, Ha'amal, Yom Echad B'Shana Chashuv Shana. Okay, Rabbi Meir says somewhere else, which we're going to see in a minute, that 1 day in a year is enough to be considered a year, in which case that doesn't match our Mishnah because our Mishnah clearly needed 30 days. They said if it's not within 30 days, it's not considered a year. That's assuming, again, that our Mishnah is referring to, right, this idea that in order for it to count for a year, it needs a 30-day period. Okay, so that's the assumption right now. How do we know that Rabbi Meir holds this? We're going to go to a different topic. Ditanya, Pal Ha'amor B'Torah Stam. There's different animals mentioned in the Torah and the different names. And sometimes it's confusing what exact animal is this called. But we're going to learn that the names of the animals sometimes they can be talking about the same animal, but using a particular name connotes an age. Okay, so when you see the word pal, it's talking about a bull, but it's a bull that's 3 years old. Okay, now what's 3 years old? According to Rabbi Meir, so if you see par stam, like you need the par for Yom Kippurim, remember the Kohen brings the special Yom Kippur korban, or the par helem davar shel tzibur, when the Beit Din teaches the wrong halacha and the people all follow them, you bring a par. So what's this par? Ben 24 chodesh v'yom echad. It's 24 months and 1 day, right? In other words, saying into the 3rd year by 1 day only. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Elazar omer ben 24 chodesh u'shloshim yom. I would have said this differently. I would have said either 2 months and 2 years and a month, or I would have said 25 months, right? They say kind of funny, 24 months and 30 days, which is really basically 25 months. But anyway, right, it highlights what we're looking for, which is 30 days is a year. Only when it's into the year 30 days do we count it as 3 years old. It's not 3 years old otherwise. By the way, where's the most popular case where we do this? Bar and bat mitzvah. It's 12 and a day or 13 and a day, right? That 1 day. We hold like Rabbi Meir on this issue. So now they say, Shaya Rabbi Meir Omer. Now we need the background for this machloket, which is, I already gave you some of it, but here we're going to see different animals are called different names and how old are they? Kol makom shenemar egel b'Torah. Okay, this comes from cattle. So young cattle is egel b'Torah stam. If it just says the word egel, it means ben shana. It needs to be within its 1st year. Ben bakar, if it says Egel ben bakal, that means ben shtayim, 2 years old. Par ben shalosh. Okay, so once you see a par, you know it's 3 years. Again, the relevance of this is for sacrifices. You have to know which animal you can bring. So now they say, so that's the end of our suggestion. The Gemara seemed to say, it looks like our Mishnah is not holding like Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir will require only 1 day, and our Mishnah require, I'm sorry, not our Mishnah, my mistake, the Braita. The Braita that we started with today talks about how 30 days is the cutoff. So it must be 30 days and not 1 day. So it must not match Rabbi Meir. Okay, I'll already tell you the structure. We're now going to try to reject this suggestion, but we're going to reject the rejection. And in the end, we're going to be left with, it's not Rabbi Meir. If it's not Rabbi Meir, we're going to say it's Rabbi Elazar. The Gemara then is going to raise a problem with that. And we're going to go back eventually to saying it is Rabbi Meir and understanding this Braita differently than we understood it in the beginning, which is what I kind of alluded to when we first started learning it. So now the Gemara is going to say, wait a minute. Maybe afilu tema Rabbi Meir. Maybe you can explain this Braita according to Rabbi Meir. How so? Ki ka'amar Rabbi Meir yom echad b'shana chashuv shana b'sof shana. These are 2 different kinds of countings. One is starting your first year. Can you count 30 days as a year or 1 day as a year? And the animal is, can you count the last year partially as a full year? Right? Because we're counting, you got 24 full months, year 1, year 2, and now year 3, only a little bit will count. So what they want to suggest is maybe when Rabbi Meir said you need only a day, he's talking about the end of a count because you've already had 2 full years. So 1 more day, you can already say it's a year. But when it comes to beginning a count, maybe you need a unit that's significant in order to start counting. So that's what they're going to say, right? Maybe Rabbi Meir says, Kikam Rabbi Meir, Yom echad b'shana chashuv shana. 1 day can be considered a full year, b'sof shana, at the end of a counting. It's not really at the end of a year. It really means at the end of a count, when you try to get to the last year, the final year in a count. But you're not going to say that in the beginning of a count. That's not you. To start something off, you need something more significant. But the Gemara is going to totally reject this. Rav is going to reject it. And where is he going to? He says it's a kavachomer from Nida that it would be the reverse. How so? A Nida, according to Torah law, this isn't what we do today, but according to Torah law, a Nida, a woman who has menstrual bleeding, is a Nida in a period of impurity for 7 days, including, right, it starts from the first day she starts bleeding, and it goes 7 days. At the end of that 7th day, it says in the Torah, Shivat Yamim Tia B'Nida. I brought the verse on the sheet. 7 days she should be in Nida. That means she has to be 7 complete days. She can't go to the mikvah until after the end of the 7th day. Most people who go to and this is unique because most people who go to the mikvah go in the morning of their last day. She has to wait until the 7th day is entirely complete. This is where we're going with it, right? The end has to be entirely complete, even though the beginning doesn't. Why? Because whenever she starts bleeding, she counts that day as her first day. Doesn't matter if it was in the morning, in the afternoon, right? Obviously at night, it will be the next day, halachically, but in a halachic day, right, as long as it was before sunset, that counts already as her first day. So what do you see? To start her count, I'm already going to explain this, and then we'll read it inside. To start her count, she just needs a little bit. To end her count, she needs a complete day. And that's the exact reverse. So we're going to say, you can make a kavachomer from here. So let's read it. Uma nida, if a nida, she'ein tchilat hayom olela b'sofa, just the beginning of the day doesn't help her at the end. She needs an entire complete day. Then sof hayom olala b'tchilata, and yet sof hayom olala b'tchilata. The end of the day, right, in the beginning does actually work. So therefore, if to get started, if to finish, she needs a complete day, but to get started even a little bit. So shana, when you're talking about our years here, sheyom echad olela b'sofa, if you want to say that 1 day is enough when it comes to the par, right? Even 1 day is enough according to Rabbi Meir at the end. When in Nida, at the end it didn't work, but at the beginning it did work. Wouldn't you then say that in the beginning 1 day should be enough? One day should count. So therefore, I see you're talking about Shiva. Shiva works in both cases, right? Miktzad Yom Kikulo in the beginning and at the end. Okay, this is right. That's what it's called. Miktzad Yom Kikulo. We couldn't treat part of a day as an entire day. So you see that it's different in different situations. So basically, they make a chomer from here and say it must be, if Rabbi Meir holds at the end it's enough, it actually should work also at the beginning to start the count. So what we suggested doesn't really work. And then we're left with it's not Rabbi Meir. Well, if it's not Rabbi Meir by default, it has to be Rabbi Elazar. which makes sense because it's 30 days and Rabbi Elazar says 30 days, so perfect. But not so perfect because the Gemara raises a different issue, which is why I said this is a little confusing because we didn't raise this issue at all before. It was as if this issue didn't exist. All of a sudden they're going to say, but wait, this other issue you didn't think about. Ve'elamai Rabbi Elazar, but what? Then it's Rabbi Elazar. If that's the case, shloshim u'shloshim bai, then you would need 30 and another 30. While you need 60 altogether. It's an easier way to just say it. Why? Ditnan. In other words, then you would need to start planting 60 days before Rosh Hashanah, according to Rabbi Elazar, because you would need 30 days for what he thinks for a year, and 30 days before, the 30 days that are just before the year really go with the next year. So if you're going to say that there's this, we want to count this as a year that's separate from that, you can't use the 30 days right before because the 30 days right before are automatically considered part of the next year. Then we have Rabbi Elazar adding 30 days because if, let's say, Aleph Be'elul is considered like Aleph B'Tishrei, which we'll see in a minute why it is when it comes to planting trees, then basically if you want to say this is going to count as a year before, then you have to have another 30 days before, according to Rabbi Elazar. And that clearly doesn't appear in the Braita. Now, why do you need this 30 days? And now we're going to see it's not necessarily 30. It could be 3 or it could be 14. But either which way, it's something additional to the 30. Ditnan. Ein notzim, ve'ein mavarechim, ve'ein markivim. The same 3 verbs we had in our Braita. You can't plant. You can't replant a shoot next to a tree. And ein markivim, you can't graft. Erev shvi'it pachot milamed yom lifnei Rosh Hashanah. Okay, you can't do it 30 days before. This is kind of what the Braita said. But it says here, in this Mishnah, it says, V'im nata v'hivrich v'hirkiv ya'akol. And if you did it, you have to uproot it. Now, this is not midin because this Tosefet. This is a halacha because of what we call hashrasha or haklata. Anything that didn't take root yet is considered, it goes by when it takes root. So the Tanna Kama thinks it takes 30 days for it to take root. So anything you plant on Aleph Be'elul goes with Aleph B'Tishrei. Okay, it's as if it was planted in Aleph B'Tishrei. Okay, now some people think this is really, it goes by that. Some people say that, right? Some people understand this is in Tosefet. Okay, Rashi says this is Tosefet. Okay, this is because it's part of Tosefet Shvi'it, right? Therefore, we can't do it, right? You have to uproot it. And then again, according to Rabbi Elazar, if you wanted to count for a year, though, it has to start from before, because this is already, this would be, if you hold Tosefet back to yesterday's machloket, is an extension of, right, rather than something new. If it's an extension of, then it's really considered the next year already. Some people say that it's actually a concern, or some people say it's a penalty, that we institute a penalty because we're worried people aren't going to take Shemitah seriously. They're not so, it's hard to keep Shemitah. So they weren't so careful about it. So they made it even more strict to kind of ensure, like safeguard it. Some people say it's that if it only took root in the upcoming year and you planted it earlier, well, when is it going to be noticeable that you planted this tree? Only when it took root, which is going to be in the Shemitah year. So if you start counting this tree, right, and then you eat in 3 more years your orla fruit, people are going to think that you planted it in the Shemitah year because they'll see it took root there and they'll think that you planted in the Shemitah year, and they'll basically, accuse you of planting in Shemitah year. So to avoid that concern, we basically say if it took root in the Shemitah year, we're not going to go by that because we're not going to consider there was the year before, okay? Because then people will think that you planted in the Shemitah year. There's like issues of concern. Anyway, let's get back to our topic. So basically, he says you need this extra 30 days. Those 30 days are really considered like the next year. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kol harkava she'ena koletet b'shlosha yamim, shuv ena koletet. He says, if your tree didn't take root within 3 days, it's never going to take root, which is basically another way of saying it's not 30 days, it's 3 days for it to take root. It sounds like they're having an agricultural machloket here, like a reality. What happens? Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Shimon omrim shtei Shabbatot. They have the in-between approach, 2 weeks. Okay, so you basically have 3 days, 14 days, or 30 days, which basically means that the Amar Rav Nachman bar Avua, Amar Rabba bar Avua. Now, we don't yet know exactly how this relates to our Braita, but Rav Nachman said in the name of Rabba bar Avua, L'divrei ha'omer shloshim, tzarich shloshim v'shloshim. לדברי האומר 3, צריך 33, לדברי האומר 6 שבתות, צריך 2 שבתות ו30 יום. Now he says, if you go back to our original Braita, the concept discussed in our Braita, not what it says in our Braita says 30. But if you go back to that law, basically, if you hold, it takes 30 days to take root, in order for it to be considered the previous year, you'll need 30 plus 30, you'll need 60. And if you say it's 14 days for it to take root, then in order for it to be considered its own year, right, and permitted to plant before the Shemitah year, you'd need 44 days. And if you say it's 3 days, you'd need 33 days. Now, none of those appear in the Braita. So if it's Rabbi Elazar, right, you would assume, let's assume Rabbi Elazar says 30 for that. He'd probably say 30 for the other thing. So basically he needs 60. And our Braita says 30. So it doesn't make sense. And now they say, even if you say he holds by the most minimalist opinion in that Mishnah, then what would he hold? 3 days plus another 30, 33. Still, you can't explain it with the Braita. So therefore, assuming now, and as the assumption is our Mishnah clearly needs those 30 days before. And that's why we have 30 days before. Now it's a little tricky though. It doesn't work like Rabbi Elazar, but also doesn't work like Rabbi Meir, because now we're learning our Mishnah is either going to, and it's our Braita that said 30 days before Rosh Hashanah counts as a full year and you can do it before Shemitah. So now if the 30 days before are considered, right, part of the next year, the Shemitah year or the Orly year, then you would need something, right? You need more than 30 days for it to be considered. So if it was Rabbi Elazar, we need 30 more, right? If you say the 30 days are made up of the 3 plus, right, or the 14 plus, let's say only 14 days are considered part of the next year, or only 3 days. But still, if we're going to go with either Rabbi Meir or Rabbi Elazar, you need to add 1 day at least, or 30 days. So then you would have, let's say, either 4 days or 15 days. That would be Rabbi Meir, or 31 days. And those are your 3 possibilities. According to Rabbi Elazar, you would need the 3 plus 30, so 33, or 14 plus 30, 44, or 30 plus 30, 60. So it's definitely not Rabbi Elazar, that's for sure. It's also not Rabbi Meir, though, because, right, if it's not going to be Rabbi Elazar, we'll assume it's Rabbi Meir, because what did we just say? Rabbi Meir would need either 3 plus 1, that would be 4 days. And here it says 30. 14 plus 1, that would be 15 days. That would be that would be, right, 15. Or 30 plus 1, that would be 31. Again, none of those appear in our Mishnah. So that's where the Gemara is going to be stuck right now. First, they're going to say it can't be Rabbi Elazar because you would have needed 60 or 44 or 33, and that's not what it says in the Braita. So it must be Rabbi Meir. And then the 30 mentioned here is for klita, is for, having it take root. And then you'd have to say Rabbi Meir holds by the Tanakama in the Mishnah that says 30 days for it to take root. But again, what are you missing? You're missing it's very nice, it takes root for 30 days, but what about the 1 day that you need for it to be counted as the previous year? 30 is to say, right, those 30 days belong to the next year. So how can you do it without that 1 day? So again, the Gemara is going to say, Ihachi, Lamed Aleph Mitbai. It should be 31 because you need, again, there's 2 issues. There's Hashrashat, taking root, which they call Haklata here in the Gemara. Plus, you need, because the whole Braita is, we're considering this the previous year. So you need at least an element of, according to Rabbi Meir, only 1 day, according to Rabbi Elazar, 30. So what do they answer? That we can resolve. Kasaval Yom Shloshim Oleh Lekanu Lekan. The 30 goes in both directions. It's 30 days for Hashrasha, but day number 30, right, going backwards, the first day you planted can also be considered the first, it's kind of like the last day of the previous year, and now it's going to take root within 30 days, so it counts for both. And therefore, in the end, they say our Braita is Rabbi Meir. So as I said, we're going to now reinterpret the Braita. Until now, we thought it was this issue of 30 days before is a unit of a year. No, it's not. It's that 1 day is a unit of a year, and the 30 days are basically, right, it's really 1 plus 30. It's really like 31, but it's really 30 because it's like 30 counts for both. 1 day for the year and 30 days for it taking root. Because anything less than 30 days is already considered next year's crop as if you planted it next year, and therefore that's not in the count of the year. So we've now just reinterpreted the Braita in a very different manner. Now Rabbi Yochanan is going to go back to this machloket, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Elazar, and get to what's the root of their debate. Where did they learn it from? Okay, where did they get it? And they both learned it from the same verse. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, u'shnehem mika'achad darshu. They both learned it from the same verse. What's that verse? Vayihi be'echat v'shesh me'ot shana barishon be'echad l'chodesh. We're now in Noach, in the Mabul, in the flood. What happens? On the 601st year, so it says, be'echat v'shesh me'ot shana. In the Torah, often they reverse, right? In modern Hebrew, and this is important for our sugya, so pay attention. In modern Hebrew, we say, shesh me'ot ve'echat. In the Torah, they often say, echat v'shesh me'ot. But our drasha soon is going to suggest that it should have said 601 and not 1 and 600. Okay, and that we can darshan something from that, even though that's normally the typical way they do it in the Torah. But anyway, that's freedom of drashot. So it says, in the 601st year, which is the 601st year of what? Of Noach's life. Okay, we're talking about him. The assumption of this, by the way, is that Noach must have been born on Rosh Hashanah, or maybe the Torah always counts people's years of living from Rosh Hashanah, okay? Because otherwise this doesn't make any sense. And Rosh Hashanah, I should be very careful about how I say Rosh Hashanah. I should really say not Rosh Hashanah. It's counting Noach from the day of creation, okay? As if his birthday was the day of creation, whether it was or wasn't is a machloken among the commentaries. Maybe he was born on the day the world was created, or maybe, again, the Torah just counts his years from there. Okay, but otherwise, this whole drasha doesn't make sense if you think he was born on some random day in the middle of the year. So it was 601 years into his life. Barishon be'echad l'chodesh. Now, what's echad l'chodesh? Echad l'chodesh is the first of Nisan. And I'm sorry, echad l'chodesh is the first day of the month, and Barishon is the first month. First month, we always say in the Torah, is Nisan. This whole, I have to tell you this, otherwise you're going to be confused. I'm going to tell you something that's going to come up in the Gemara after. This whole drasha is based on the fact that the world was created on the 1st of Nisan. There's a big debate about when the world was created, 1st of Tishrei, 1st of Nisan. We're going to get into that today, started at the very end of our daf and get into it more tomorrow. There's a big debate about when the world was created, 1st of Nisan, 1st of Tishrei. This has to assume, because what the whole drasha is going to be premised on, we're at the very beginning of the 601st year, because we're at the first month, the first day. First month, first day being Nisan, the 1st of Nisan, which means that Nisan is the first day of the creation of the world. And yet it's going to be calling it the 601st year. If we don't consider one day to be a year, then it shouldn't have called it the 601st year. That's going to be Rabbi Meir's proof. So let's read it. Rabbi Meir Savar, Mida'akata Yom Echad Uda'ayel B'Shana, since it's only the first day into the year, V'kakare Lashana, and it calls it a year, Shma Mina Yom Echad B'Shana Chashuv Shana, since said it was in the first and 600, which really means, in other words, 601st year, and it already said it was that year, even though we were only one day into the year, that means that one day is already considered a year. V'idach, so how's Rabbi Elazar going to learn from here that 30 days is a year? So first, he's going to reject Rabbi Meir's proof. And he says, and this is where the order of how you say 601 or 1 in 600 comes into play. Iktiv, if it would have said, b'shesh me'ot be'echat shana, and then the word echat came right next to the word shana, and it said 601st year, and first goes with year, then I would have said what you said, kidikamarta, like you said. But hashta diftiv, but now, because the pasuk reversed it, again, it didn't really reverse it because that's often how the Torah speaks, but let's just assume it was reversed. Be'achat v'shesh me'ot shana, since it says 1 and 600 years, and notice what word is next to shana? 600, which means we're one day into the 601st year, but we're calling it 600 years because we're putting the year next to 600. So therefore, atchalta de'achat kam, shana ashesh me'ot kai. The Shana is really referring, they still call the 600th year because we hadn't yet gone further into that year. My echat, so why does it say echat? Itchalta de echat kamar. It was saying we're now starting into the first year after 600, but it wasn't really counted as a year yet. That's why the Shana comes right next to 600. So that's his rejection of Rabbi Meir. The question is, how from this verse does he derive 30 days? It never says 30 days anywhere in the verse. So, because remember, he said both of them learned it from this pasuk. So how so? He's going to darshan it from different words. But Rabbi Elazar, my time, what's his reason? Dichtiv barishon be'echad lachodesh. Notice how it says in the first month on the first day of the year. on the first day of the month. Notice it says be'echad lachodesh. It says it was the first day of the month and it called it a month. So therefore, one day is considered, right? One day into a month already is considered the month. So now, this is where we make an analogy. One is to a month, right? One day into the month is to a month as, right? A month is made up of days. So one day to a month, a year is made up of months. So 1 month into the year is going to be considered significant. So since we're going to call one day a month, if one day is considered a month, 30 days into a year is considered a year. To which the Gemara says, so we're going to continue for 1 minute. Right? In other words, each one goes by what you count it by. Right? We don't normally count a year as made up of days. We count a year made up of months, and a month is made up of days. So therefore, that's the analogy. Now the Gemara is going to say, what's clear from here, though, is that both commentaries go by the fact they both agree, right? And you can see because Rabbi Elazar retorted to Rabbi Meir, not, oh, this was really the 7th month of the year, and that's why he called it a year, because the world was actually created in Tishrei, and we're in Nisan right now. No, he doesn't say that. He actually just brings a different answer, which means they both hold that this was the first day of the year. This is the first day of the year, and we're obviously counting from Briat HaOlam, from the one that the world was created. Therefore, it must be that the world was created in Nisan. And now we're going to start the famous Braita about when the world was created. Machloket Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer, we'll only see Rabbi Eliezer's opinion today. Omer b'Tishrei nivra ha'olam. Okay, this is the other opinion. He says the world was created in Tishrei. B'Tishrei noldu avot. Okay, all sorts of historical events that happen and what dates they happened on. The avot, okay, the fathers were born all on Tishrei. B'Tishrei metu avot, they also died in Tishrei. B'Pesach nolad Yitzchak, right? This is because Avram tells the angels, this week's parsha, he tells Sarah, Lushi ugot, right? They say it's matzah, and then, right, it was Pesach, the Midrash says, and therefore, right, remember, he's told exactly in a year from now, you'll have a son. So he was born on Pesach. Rosh Hashanah nifkeda Sarah, Rachel v'Chana. Their prayers were all answered to have children on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah yatsa Yosef mi beit ha'asurim. He basically got out of jail on Rosh Hashanah. Again, this is all Tishrei. Rosh Hashanah batla avodah me'avotenu b'Mitzrayim. Okay, they stopped working. The avdut ended, okay, even though they didn't leave yet. B'Nisan nigalu, they got out in Nisan. B'Tishrei atidim ligael. Since the world was created in Tishrei, even though the Yetziat Mitzrayim redemption happened in Nisan, but in the future redemption is going to happen in Tishrei. It's almost like this is why he's saying it. Future redemption maybe will be, right, again, this is a more universal theme. The Nisan is not a special month because it's the Jewish people's special month. No, there's this universal, and then there's the Jewish people have their own thing, which is Yetziat Mitzrayim. That happened in Nisan. But it even says, right, the Avoda, they stopped actually, slavery finished already in Tishrei. There's some sort of aspect of the redemption that happened in Tishrei. We'll talk about this more tomorrow when we'll see the other opinion. Anyway, we'll stop here for today. Have a great day, everyone. So, and maybe I'll just do a quick review. We took, mainly what we did today is we took this Braita that was not 100% clear, right? Especially the line that all of a sudden said, these Peirot or Asurim, right, all the way into Tu B'Shvat. We had to explain that aspect. Then we went back to the beginning and tried to explain the 30 days. Why do we have these 30 days? Is it because we hold like Rabbi Elazar, who needs 30 days? But then we said, no. There's this extra element of there's the extra element of this extension, that whatever those 30 days are actually really the next year, and therefore you need something additional. So in the end, we say it's actually Rabbi Meir. Okay. Then we brought where Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Elazar, when they were arguing about the par, 1 day or 30 days, where did they get it from? They both learned it from this verse in Noach, which we darshaned in 2 different ways. And then we get to the fact that both of them held that in Nisan Nivra Olam. And then we bring the famous machloket, Rabbi Eliezer, not to be confused with Rabbi Elazar. Right? Rabbi Elazar held like Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer held that it was in Tishrei. But we're going to see Rabbi Yeshua's opinion tomorrow. They held that it was Nisan, that the world was created. And then you wouldn't be able to do that drasha, because that drasha is clearly based on the fact that the first day of the first month, and this was in the 601st year, it was the first month of the year. If you don't say it was the first month of the year, there's no way to darshan the pasuk the way we did. That was a quick summary of today. Have a great day, everyone.